So news.com is trying to shame the Opal Tower certifier. Let's have a look. Good morning everyone and welcome to this episode of Heiser Says. I've got my coffee and I'm ready to talk about the Opal Tower again. So, this is an interesting article written by Ben Graham about the certifier who approved the certified the Opal Tower was brought up on disciplinary actions by the watchdog. Oh no, where there's smoke, there's fire. This isn't a way to kind of create a story out of nothing, is it? Let's have a look. So, a director of the company that oversaw the certification of Sydney's crumbling Opal Tower has been disciplined by the building watchdog before it has emerged. Judgment records show Mackenzie Group director Mark Kogo was slapped with 2 fines, a reprimand and 3 cautions by the Building Professionals Board between 2004 and 2009, nearly 10 years ago. Now, full disclosure, I have worked with Mackenzie Group in the past. I've engaged them as certifiers on projects that we have run. I've had to ring the Sydney office so they give the bloody Brisbane boys a kick up the arse to meet time frames, but I've worked with them and they seem quite reasonable. I think they're getting a bit expensive on the last fees, but you know, that's just the way the market is. So, I've worked with these guys. He was handed an $11,000 fine after he was found guilty of unsatisfactory professional conduct on January 16, 2009. A judgment shows Mr. Kogo, now based in Queensland, was an accredited certifier and principal certifying authority for a warehouse redevelopment at 56 Anzac Road, in Sydney's west. According to the watchdog, he authorised a fire safety solution that was inadequate and ignored advice from the New South Wales Fire Brigades. Okay, let's pull this apart because it sounds really bad, but in many ways it isn't. Now, for those of you that aren't in the building game, you have to realise certifiers are generalists and they're pretty much privatised bureaucrats. It's their job to take the advice, reports and information provided by a range of professionals, depend on that advice, and then approve it. Essentially give it a stamp for certification. They're taking on the responsibilities that councils used to take on in the past in the hopes of speeding up the construction industry. The challenge is that if the certifier is hired by the client, as opposed to a separate body, there's a potential for a conflict of interest there. Sure, there are mechanisms in place to minimize that, but it still exists. There's still a potential there. Now, a fire safety solution. Let's see if I've got here 2 copies of our National Construction Code, the 2016 version, and an older one, the 2014 version. Now, this is the code in all of Australia, different volumes 1 and 2 for the types of buildings that you have to work with. And there's 2 parts into it. There's 2 ways that it works. You've got a prescriptive part of the code, and that's where, say, you're digging a foundation, you have to make your footing this size if it has this soil. Boom. That's prescriptive. It tells you exactly what to do. If you follow the prescriptive parts of this book, you can get a rubber stamp or stamp from your certifier, and that's deemed competent and appropriate. Okay? Fantastic. That's good. Lots of people do that. You know, you can see examples right in here. There you go. You know, like pictures of framing and all these type of things. So there's prescriptive things in there. But we also have the potential to innovate in our building code. It wasn't just so locked down that we wouldn't have any innovation, because that stifles the ability for people to test new things, to push boundaries, and for technology to be deployed in our building industry. So you can have a performance-based solution. Okay? So say, well, my house that I'm in right now, we have, we're in beautiful old farmland with wonderful organic soil that moves up and down like anything in the rain. Certain doors will open and close now in Queenslander because of the rain. We've got rid of a lot of trees and that's helped, but still. So, we cannot use any of the prescriptive requirements in the NCC for our footing design. We need to have a performance-based engineered solution to address this particular issue. Okay, now that's one example, but you can do it for pretty much anything. You can essentially break the rules if you can put an argument on the table with professional evidence that your solution is better or meets or exceeds the requirements of the performance-based solution. That is the opportunity for innovation in our building code, in the National Construction Code. Now, the problem is that costs money. Costs extra money, extra time. So you don't do it all the time. You only do it when you absolutely have to, or if you want to really try something new. You know, people push the building code used to change every year, but now they've slowed it down because it was just getting insane. You have to buy this book every year and be up to date with it every year, and that was just crazy. And I've been to presentations where you would sit in a room full of certifiers and architects, and they would talk for hours on minuscule changes in this, and I literally fell asleep because it was so boring, and my wife Rachel really loves it. But this is the thing. If you can have a performance-based solution that is depending on the advice from other professionals, and that's what the certifier's job is. They will ensure that the professional is adequately qualified, meets the requirements, but they cannot make a judgment call on the design, or they cannot have input in the design. They can only base it on the advice that they're given. They compare it to what's in the prescriptive requirements of the National NCC, and if it's appropriate based on their evidence, they can go, yes, fantastic, stamp. They've got a very tough job with regards to insurance. I don't envy them. So here in this example, where they have a fire safety solution, what they did is they would have engaged another party to prepare a report or to look at different alternatives to address the issues that were identified in the NCC, in the code. Now, this is where it gets complicated. They ignored the advice from the New South Wales Fire Brigade. Here in Queensland, the Queensland Fire and Rescue Service is not an authority. They're an advisory body. So that means if you've got a building and you're doing whatever you want in it, or particularly where the fire brigade has to be involved in positioning fire detectors and moving things around, they can give you advice. They don't give you approval. You can, if you're ballsy enough, ignore their advice. I wouldn't recommend it, and do something else so long as you have a position. Technically, you can do that. I don't know anyone who would. I've never heard of anyone who's doing it because, frankly, you want to keep them on side. But if their conditions are too onerous and you have an adequate solution, you could do that. Okay, because they are an advisory body. They're not an authority. So he authorized a fire safety solution for the internal space of the warehouse, which was inadequate, the judgment reads. 2, he failed to ensure that the perimeter access was adequate for fire brigade vehicles in the event of a fire. And in deciding not to follow the advice of the New South Wales Fire Brigade, he relied on a report from an independent consultant who, contrary to the relevant rule, was not qualified as an accredited certifier at the appropriate level. So this really is the issue here, and I've seen this happen as well, where there's certain legislation in place saying who can give professional advice to certifiers, and they feel like that they can ignore that and authorize anyone to be appropriate because there's certain ways they can do that. But that's very dangerous, and they shouldn't be doing that. So that I can see where maybe they've gone on a performance-based solution. Maybe he's been compromised to kind of push something through. Because on these large buildings, what was it? It was would have been a Class C construction, or the ones where you got the big warehouses. Yeah, a warehouse. You want to have, like, you've got your warehouse here, and you want to have the access for the fire truck to get all the way around so you can spray the hose on it, because these warehouse buildings, the precast ones, they tend to collapse inside. And you don't want to spread the fire too far around. You want to be able to fight it at all perimeters to put it out. So there's reasoning in place for that. What you can do is, if they had to put a more advanced solution in place to say they sprinklered the whole thing, that could be one way you could get around needing to have the fire brigade around it, because that would ensure that it would extinguish fires in there, but you'd need a report written to do it. So I'd want to look more into this case to see exactly what happened. But I mean, if the solution was fine, I haven't read anything about them tearing down the building, but the procedure he followed was incorrect. Maybe the person wasn't certified, maybe they weren't licensed, and that happens more than you think. If you're doing any work in construction, guys, a piece of advice, if you're doing a home extension, if you're building a project, go to the appropriate authorities and check to make sure people are licensed. I've worked on projects in the past where they've well, no, I was in the office where they were doing a refurbishment to a medical job. And these medical hospitals, often you have different fire compartments in different areas. And my colleague found out that the subcontractor, the person putting up the plaster and putting in the fire seals around the penetration, wasn't actually licensed to do that job. So that means that they couldn't provide the appropriate certificates to the certifier, so they had to get a third party in to check the work to certify to approve it. And this can have big issues. It could, because the way you lay plaster between two walls can affect the fire protection, can affect the way that smoke gets from one compartment to another, and that affects people's safety. It can kill them. These things are quite serious in these buildings. My wife Rachel has done a thesis on fire legislation and disasters. You'd often have a disaster would appear and then legislation would change. And if you go back to the 19th century, it's horrendous, the disasters, what happened, and why we've got the legislation that we have. So in 2008, he was also fined $11,000 for issuing a construction certificate for a large residential development that was inconsistent with various aspects of the plans approved by the development consent. So this is an example where he's done a development and he's just stamped some changes that didn't align with the DA, the development approval, what the council has said or the authority has approved to be done. Now that could be anything from building the building bigger and getting a bigger financial reward for the developer. That could be some things that cropped up during construction that, are small changes that you had to address. Maybe there were some existing conditions that you hadn't identified. So you had to move a wall out a little bit. You had to build something a bit thicker. Or you had to go a bit higher to achieve a ceiling height because, someone took a measurement from. Okay, those are the type of things that can arise in that situation. I'd argue that it isn't as nefarious. It's probably, I would imagine it would have been rushed through in the very fast-paced process that construction can someone take, and people will cut corners. Sadly, this happens. The better process would have been to resubmit for another application, but that can take a lot of time, can cost a lot of money, and sometimes they'll just cop the 11 grand and the developer may have paid for it. So, but that also shows you the potential for conflict of interest, but how it can arise. So other disciplinary records show Mr. Kogo was cautioned again on September 17, 2009 because he issued a construction certificate for a Meadowbank restaurant in Sydney's West that was inconsistent with plans approved by development consent. I'd like to see how big the differences were, how large the differences were. If there were huge differences, yeah, but if they were generally in accordance, normally the certifiers have that ability to make that call. Maybe they don't in New South Wales as much as they do here. Maybe someone has it in for him. So, Mackenzie Group co-director Stephen Natili. I need to get better at these names. Has also been cautioned by the board twice in 2005. Well, they're certifiers. They've got a bureaucratic job. You can negotiate with certifiers for outcomes. So that's the problem. If they get burned like this, they become such hard asses that you don't want to work with them because they can't work with you to get a solution. Or they want so much paperwork it costs a fortune. But generally, you can get a workable solution. There's no suggestion of impropriety against Mr. Natali or Mr. Kogo regarding the Opal development. So right here, after all of this crap, they paint this picture. Now here they say, oh, yes, but we're not suggesting that there's any impropriety with the Opal development. No, we're just showing you all these things that have happened and framed it like they're such a terrible person. But then we'll just stick this in here to kind of cover our asses. So in some ways, I feel this is a really unfair article or piece of journalism, should we say, from, what's his name? From Graham. I think this it's quite unfair. Honestly, he's just looked up some reports, tried to find some dirt on the certifiers, and when you pull it apart, nothing that has appeared here has shocked me too much. On the Mackenzie Group website, it states Mr. Kogo has successfully completed numerous projects across the country and has gained unique experience over a range of projects types. You know, if it comes out that he's buggered up on this job and it's been a huge issue, you've got to also understand that the certifiers have to depend on the advice of other professionals. Okay? So in some ways, they're a jack of all trades. They're a generalist. And, you know, they're going to hate me saying this, but I keep calling them a privatized bureaucrat. They can't know everything about everything. So they should be also looking at the engineer. They should be looking at the builder. They should be looking at the geotech. All these other parties involved in this process. I wonder if News.com will. That probably takes a bit more effort. So Mark has been involved in development and building a surveying profession for almost 20 years and has gained a diverse range of experience working on large-scale complex projects requiring specially tailored compliance solutions, it reads. So this is where it comes into the performance-based solutions. Residents of Opal Tower that began cracking on Christmas Eve will spend at least another 10 days in the homes as engineers work to survey the building. The Sydney Olympic building experienced a concrete panel collapse on Monday, which triggered the evacuation of the tower and surrounding areas. While most residents were allowed back in the building within 24 hours, the construction company responsible for the building called for it to be emptied again yesterday. Julian Doyle, the New South Wales director of building company Icon, said the building was not at risk of collapse, but the fastest way for the issue to be dealt with was to remove all residents from the tower. I think ultimately the building will be as designed, he said. An angry resident confronted Mr. Doyle during his press conference at the base of the tower, demanding better temporary accommodation and a clearer timeline of when they will be allowed back home. Yeah, I'm afraid this resident doesn't understand how the construction process works and the complexities that can arise in this issue. Now they're going to want to do it right. There's a lot of ways they can rectify it. They need to identify where the structural issues are with the building. They need to look at what modifications they can make to the building to account for this damage that's occurred, to ensure it doesn't happen in the future, and to ensure the continued structural integrity of the building. You know, maybe they'll need to add some carbon fiber to strengthen certain slabs, or add additional methods to transfer load around this compromised panel. Or maybe they'll need to replace the panel or patch it up. So Mr. Doyle could not guarantee residents will be able to move back within 10 days. News.com contacted Mackenzie Group for comment, but it has not yet responded. And this article was updated at 7:46 p.m. on December 28, and they haven't responded. Do you know why? I bet you they're on holiday. I bet you they are on holiday. So, you know, sure, they've had some bugger ups in the past. You got to watch them. All certifiers are like that. Particularly when they don't check the quality of the additional party that they are, the professional that they're depending on. I've seen it happen all the time. As an architect, it frustrates the hell out of me. But, you know, I think this is a bit disingenuous with how they're pulling it apart, the way they're painting a picture. Here, I kind of feel sorry for Mackenzie Group, to be honest. This is bad publicity. I haven't found out who the architect is, to be honest. I haven't really looked into it. I've been a bit afraid to. If it's someone I look up to, I don't want to, you know, have some illusions shattered. But, guys, I thought I'd just share you this and give a bit of an architect's perspective on some of these things they're talking about. It isn't as clear-cut and simple as they're reporting. Ben, mate, do a bit more digging. Look at a bit more of what else is going on with this building. Why don't you go interview the people at the precast company? Oh, wait a minute, you have to leave your desk. I can't really talk. I very rarely leave my desk when I'm working or doing this type of thing. Guys, thank you very much for joining me for this episode of Heiser Says. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Bye for now.